we like to keep things as interesting as possible, never one to rest on either our laurels or confidence that we can pull off a completely crazy stunt. So we like to keep the envelope pushing. If you could take out your smartphones and go to this website that is shown here, polev.com/Odyssey. If you absolutely don't have internet, you can do this by text. But ideally, go ahead and go to polev.com, and you should see here. There you go. All right. The votes are already coming in. So this is just our little tester question. If you had to pick, which is your favorite? Puppies, Game of Thrones, craft beer, the K-pop sensation Girls' Generation, or Hamilton the musical? Okay, it seems to be fairly clear that in this particular, oh, okay, all right, the puppies are coming back. If anybody has seen the movie Boss Baby, which I've seen with my kids, it's puppies versus babies. So this is craft beer versus puppies, and so far we're doing well. The good news and the most important news is it seems that people are able to connect. If for some reason you're not able to connect, you're not able to see that voting option on your phone, just hit refresh, but it should advance automatically as we go through. I want to take a moment and welcome our esteemed reaction panel to what the goal of today is. So let me first just let them introduce themselves briefly.
I'm Marc Suchard.
I'm Rijnbeek.
Andrew Williams.
Clair Blacketer.
Frank DeFalco.
So the goal of today, in some ways, is to address the people who, of course, came up to Patrick after the symposium the past 2 years and were like, so, you showed a lot of cool stuff. What are you going to do about it for the next year? And we've had panels every year. We've had discussions. But what we haven't done is sort of just gathered what everybody's feeling and thinking and excited about coming right out of the Collaborator Showcase and all the cool stuff that's been shown today. So the goal of this session is to talk about some of the things and where people are at and where Odyssey should be going. And it should be kind of fun. So here we go. Oh, Hamilton got one more vote. So I think somewhere out there, George is just tapping away. All right, so the first question is, when did you join the journey? You should see a little image and just tap. A little funky when you tap. So as the votes come in, what we can see here.
2003. 13 was
and again, I apologize because the actual panel, I don't know, yeah, the actual panel can't see the results as well. We don't have that like standard screen down there. So what we do see is there is a pretty good spread, and in fact, I would say the majority of people are not, maybe in the past few years, but there is a very, very good broad density of participants across the years, including folks, sure, that were very early on, but clearly things picked up and started getting growing very fast in 2015, and we're delighted for all the folks that are today, that are here for the first time, but also really excited that so many people have come and stuck around over these years, and I think those who have been very gratified by what they've seen. So that's the spread. I don't know if there's any strong feelings from the panel, or we'll just keep moving along.
What happened in 2013?
2013 is like CDMV3. It's kind of this, just this black hole of it. Stuff was going on, but nobody wants to talk about it. All right. All right. So this is a free text one. Why Odyssey? What brought you to the symposium? What brought you to Odyssey? Why? So this particular one, we're kind of word clouding up here. Somebody put coercion, and I appreciate that. So it's evolving as it's. We'll give a couple minutes for people to put some answers in. As
2 laptops logged in?
What's that?
Could we have 2 laptops logged in? I could put one here for that.
Yeah, if you want to grab another one, I think we can pull it off. Mara will need to log in for you. I think. All right. So it's good to see that there's some votes for Patrick. But let's see as this builds up. So data's big, open source science, collaboration, OMOP. Certainly the driving thing, snacks are probably going to go up for next year's symposium because, I mean, thank you tremendously to Mara and Elise because these were some of the best snacks I think I've had just permanently, not just at OHDSI Symposium. So,
Except in 2013.
yeah, except 2013. So again, we're seeing a lot of consistency here around research and data and open source collaborations. People here for professional reasons, people here for other reasons. I don't know if any comments from the gallery about some of the items here. And you know, I'm going to try to move this down. So here you go, guys. So in this particular question, we're just kind of, it's generally bigger from the rest. But clearly there's a lot of things that are drawn around both the open science and the tools and the research and data collaborations. And so I think that's not too much of a surprise for many folks here. Okay, so I'm going to just do a quick little thing here so these guys can see what is going on. And this should, if everything works, show you what's happening.
And I just forward to the next question.
Yeah, I'll do that. Okay. All right, so when it loads, you'll be ready. Okay, we're going to move on. Right. So we're going to move on to the next question, which is getting right down to the showcase. And then we're going to go back to a little bit more formal questions. But coming right at the showcase, we obviously had some winners. But what was the coolest thing that you saw in the showcase today? Whether it's presentation, somebody you chatted with.
What do I do?
All right, so somebody saw a bear, which was very interesting, as the team can see, and those who are close can see on Marc's laptop. If you want to, yeah, if you guys can see that, I don't know if that's. So a lot of interest, machine learning, collaborations, great posters, OMOP to FIRE, predictive modeling, seeing what Atlas and Chart Review is doing, Google BigQuery, seeing a lot of cool work with ETL development. I'm going to do one other thing here, just kind of lining up there. R packages, and then seems to be a similar reunion with colleagues, ETLs, Query Garden, that's a good name. The name also goes a long way. So let me just word cloud it up, see if we get any more clarity in that and what kind of things are there. So from the crew here on the board, Peter, are you gratified to see the predictive
I love
machine
seeing
learning
this, yes. Actually, I
piece
predicted
so
that
big?
this was going to happen.
You predicted, all right.
This is,
So Peter
absolutely.
actually called this.
Yes.
How many times did you
I did it
type in predictive
20
modeling?
times, but
Okay.
don't tell it. Yeah. No, it's great to see machine learning and predictive modeling picking up so much. Actually, looking at the posters, there are so many posters related to prediction compared to last year, so I think that's really great. I like that.
And Frank, it looks like Atlas is getting quite a few shout outs there.
There's some Atlas love. I appreciate that. For me, at least, seeing the work that Odysseus has been doing with Arachne also is up there. Has been very cool and has a lot of potential for the ability to do the distributed network studies we'd like to talk about, but to date have to kind of manually push along. So it's good to see that up there.
So given what we've seen in the showcase, now I want to shift gears to ask some more concrete questions to understand a little bit about who we are here in the symposium. I want to start with just a question. This is probably unfair because people might have other things they find even more exciting than these 5. But here's 5 for you. Which of these is most exciting to you? Developing better analytic methods, building better software tools, answering more clinical questions, publishing more in the literature, deploying more evidence to health systems. So of those 5, what do people think? And we'll give it a little time to click along here. You might need to brighten up here.
Brighten up my life? Oh, and click next. I thought Peter was here to brighten up my life. There you go.
So we're seeing a very interesting. So to me, this is quite interesting, and certainly is D working? Okay. Just making sure. I'm gonna vote and just be sure because I'm a little concerned that D is not coming through here because I think that's. Here we go. Okay. What's that?
My major objective is not commensurate with the rest of the group.
Well, so it's, oh, here we go. Thank you. D is working, so I will not go ahead and I'm going to call the company and find out what happened to D. So there's some very interesting things here, and I will, of course, let everybody comment. But from my perspective, one, it's nice to see the balance in many of the things that we're doing around methods, around tool development, around answering questions, evidence generation. Those are three of the things that I think Patrick really highlighted this morning. I personally, as an informatician and like a clinical decision support guy and fire guy and that, am really excited about the fact that deploying evidence into health systems and other environments seems to be a really big interest of the community that's here. It's on par with methods and with evidence generation. So that OHDSI perhaps has a role in going out. Publishing didn't do as well right here. What do you guys think?
Shows a nice focus on things that matter. I think publishing is really a means to the end of some of the other things. If you answered questions and deployed it to health systems, then you've kind of gotten to the end goal, and publishing is really a means of getting there. So that's my hypothesis as to why it's low on the scheme there.
But publishing brings along supposedly peer review and external validation, whereas just pushing out to the health system, you can push lots of tools out that may have no impact, or there might not be a way of evaluating that impact, either positive or negative. And I think using the peer review system could certainly be a way of improving the quality of the work that we do in the community.
I agree.
So it's an interesting.
But I stand almost alone.
Well, no. So it's relatively low numbers, and I was suspecting this might be the case. So I put in this question: why is there not that much interest in publishing? Because I suspected this would be the response, perhaps, that this group would give. So what do you guys think? Just real quick, any thoughts? There is. Okay. So people are busy. And it's not to say maybe because the way we framed the question, which was most exciting to you, that people are more interested in evidence generation than they were in publishing. So some answers coming in here as far as just reasons. The opposite of exciting. Time, no money. It's interdisciplinary, which is interesting. So is to say maybe it's hard to do because it requires a lot of people to come together to publish in the literature. Maybe the phrase "the literature" was sort of too esoteric itself.
But I think it's a good point of the perception that it's hard. I mean, it's certainly in the SOS challenge, it was the most difficult component, getting the people together to synthesize the information so it could be understood by individuals outside of the community. And so perhaps as a community, we need to task ourselves with making that an easier process. I don't know immediately how we make it easier, but we're a bunch of relatively bright. Some of us are.
I think we're helping it a little bit by making tools that actually create part of your paper already. So we've been working on tools in Atlas and for predictive modeling, and also Martijn's work and the estimation group. That really helps, that we can standardize at least the paper formats, and we can generate data directly from the Atlas.
I'd caution going too far with the idea that there's a lack of interest in publishing. I think it may not have scored well ranked next to those things at the same time, but I think my sense is a very strong interest in letting OHDSI shine in the world that's reading publications.
I agree. I think after hearing how many new collaborators we have today, it may just be that people are just now getting their data into the CDM and just still trying to work and understand what OMOP and OHDSI is really all about. And so there may be more of an interest in publishing maybe down the line for some of our newer collaborators. It's just not a goal right now.
So I think those comments are well placed. I think we're seeing a mix of things that resonate with that, and then the bear, other than the bear, I think there's certainly a lot of comments here which are, it's slow, it's too academic, it's a means to an end, I have other priorities, I don't have a lot of time. Some people make the point that it's really more a natural product of our work. Others say we like to build. None of this, OHDSI is a diverse community. I think that's part of the point of this whole reaction panel, right, is people have different perspectives. But it's fair to say that for many people here, they want to do the work, they want to get in, they want to build stuff, and their priorities are not in publishing, but I think they may be interested in supporting the overall engine. And so I think part of what we'll explore is how we increase that engagement. So, somebody got tenured. Okay, so.
Already tenured.
This is good. All right, so we're going to keep moving on here. Where is your organization on the road to CDM adoption? We're contemplating a CDM. We are working on our first ETL. We have an OMOP CDM. We use OMOP as our sole data model, or we don't have access to any type of patient data. I think all the letters are working now, so I feel a little better. I was worried D was just going to be stuck for the whole time. I think actually, this may be a answering bias or whatever the word is, but we've got a lot of people with an OMOP CDM here that may go over even the numbers that we have been aware of. So that's really cool to see. I also see 19 responses as we use OMOP as our sole data model. And that's pretty fascinating to me as well. I don't know what you guys think about this adoption curve.
Yeah, it's very interesting that indeed there are 20 people almost who have 20 databases that really only use CDM. So in our case, in Europe, I don't know any group that really uses the OHM CDM for their daily work yet, but it should move there. So that curve should be like 60% or so.
Okay.
But we're still bimodal. There's still another mode.
Yep.
We're just contemplating an OMOP CDM. So we're all coming from different places in different waves. And I think some future questions are going to focus on what are the steps for the implementation and and how do you get past contemplating into implementing, and what are the barriers?
I think you're absolutely right. So the very next question is, how can we increase the adoption of the OMOP CDM? What are the barriers? What are the challenges? So what do folks think? And I'm going to make this a little ticker. So the first one, for those that aren't familiar, and I won't get the pronunciation right, TAMIS, is really around helping, I think, refine some of the conventions around the OMOP CDM and the ETL process. Education, pointed out, is a big one. Is ISO, like ISO standards?
Standardization?
Is that?
Anyone
perhaps?
want to out themselves? Nope.
Give it a little bit more time. Pre-canned ETL and validation, right? So we talk a lot about, which I think is true, is that the ETL process actually helps improve the quality of one's data. And I think maybe someone's saying, hey, we'd like to do some automatic ETL with some automatic validation processes, and we would be delighted to use a CDM. What do you guys, difficulties for oncology data? So some types of data maybe not as well represented?
I don't know. What does Frank think about this?
Wow, that was uncalled for. I mean, I don't know. I think it's one of the things that in our environment it's just become what we use and so adopted. So I think sometimes we don't think about it, and so I think what we're doing and how we maintain our environments. Personally, I think we could probably provide a lot of insights to the community so that this part is easier for you. So maybe it's that the community needs to share experiences more broadly with how you're creating your CDMs, pushes to vendors to say, I don't want to create my CDM, I want you to give me my CDM, but I also want you to give me visibility to see how you are creating your CDM, what rules you use. Personally, I think for the industry, for us to move forward, if every one of the organizations constantly struggling with, I'm going to do this conversion now, and we're all doing it, replicating that effort across all of our organizations, that's a huge waste of resources. So that's what I think.
Looking through the responses, a fair number of them involve terms like training, tutorials, documentation. And I know this is just the second year that at an annual symposium we've offered training, but we're certainly interested in feedback and how effective that training is, particularly when it comes to the OMOP CDM and the mappings that you need. You know, it looks like we need more workshops. There are ETL issues. How can we improve the materials that we have? Those are questions that we'd certainly like answered at your feedback for the symposium and also for the from the tutorials.
So there's another interesting pattern, which is around open source ETL scripts, standardized ETL pipelines for specific data sources. I think I'm very commonly asked questions like, we have Epic, do you have an ETL thing that we can just run? Or we have Cerner, and that's a common question. And even if our answer may be, well, you know, one Epic is not one Epic, et cetera, I think we need to have an answer to those questions. We need to have materials out where we can that say, here's a standard approach, or this is why we can't standardize it, or something along those lines, because those questions come up a lot.
Yeah, what I also see in the discussion that I had with potential data custodians is that it really comes to life when we show the tools. So when we show what we can do with it, once we've done that difficult step of ETLing, everybody's having problems with that step, but once you've done that, it opens up an enormous amount of possibilities.
Yeah.
So not only the R package, but the Atlas tool and all that kind of stuff, the data custodians do not have the resources to build those tools themselves internally. Right, so my experience that once we show the tools, once we show what we can do with the data, it really opens up there. It makes a lot of more things possible.
The motivation's there.
Yeah.
I want to also assure everybody that the data we're capturing here is all going to be stored and shared with you after the tutorial. So if you want to count up how many bears, et cetera, were mentioned or other things. But
I'm interested in publishing it. If any of the six other people are with me.
right, so these will all be shared. So I know there's a lot of curiosity about what's being shown. All right, if you do have an OMOP CDM, how are you using it today? Running SQL queries against it? Are you using Atlas? Are you using OHDSI R packages? Are you generating evidence for your internal organization's use? Are you publishing evidence in the literature? And so we'll give it a second here to see what we've got. And there's some, it's not necessarily mutually exclusive in this particular one, so allows people to be doing more than one.
For a while, I was having a hard time figuring out why the bar charts were going down when they're cumulative. Only now do I realize it gets rescaled.
This scale, yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, we'll review some of the principles a little bit later, yeah.
There's an x-axis, a y.
I mean, can you
need
believe
some-
that poop emoji? He's just like,
You need some education.
He
actually.
stinks.
so what I think is fascinating for me is, I guess you could say everyone's running SQL queries, but there's definitely a pretty good gap between people who have installed Atlas, which might be considered kind of like the standard web tool, and people who are running SQL queries. It may be kind of double. So there's a lot of people who have an OMOP CDM who do most of their work running SQL. I find that, interesting and not surprising, but interesting. I don't know what you guys think. Or in general.
We should
any
just be
thoughts?
more proud of the tools that we built, and we should show them off to more people. I'm quite sure that some people that now run those SQL queries don't know that they can do the same thing with Atlas and maybe even better.
I'll also say that deploying, just based on feedback I've gotten in the community, deploying the web API in Atlas, of which I'm obviously near and dear to me, is not the easiest thing to do.
Right.
So what I'd really be interested, John, just real quick, a follow-up. What's the major limitation?
Yeah, so I'd like to actually, let's ask everybody.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, what is the major limitation to installing Atlas
Something like that.
in your environment?
Sure.
So yeah, I think we should ask that. Now, it's interesting that the number of people here who are publishing literature does seem to be more than the number of people who want to publish. So it's interesting
It's
there.
refreshing.
Okay, it's refreshing. So it was funny because I thought people were going to say that, so I went and put this question in, which is, what is the major limitation of installing Atlas in your environment? So just curious, Frank raises, he's near and dear to his heart, but he knows it's tough.
It's not easy.
So some challenges to using Atlas in your environment. So the IT folks in the environment may say, we're not sure this is secure, or we're not sure that this is meets the standards.
Whoever said none, the check's in the mail.
2 checks. 2 checks.
Okay, so a lot of consistent things saying, gosh, a lot of big health systems aren't so comfortable with downloading open source software and installing it. And in fact, many would be much more comfortable. They just won't run open source software oftentimes in their environments for support and other reasons. Security, documentation gaps. Someone confidently has installed it. So outsourcing to other organizations. So this is a really, I think it's an important question, one to follow up. We have got some key elements to keep going. What is Atlas? So we've come to the tutorial on Friday and find out. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So if you do have a CDM, I chatted a bit about network studies earlier today. What's your biggest barrier to participating in network studies? Is it, gosh, I don't know about them, not on the forums. I don't know how to run one of those network studies. It's too time consuming, hardware limitations. It's not a priority for me or for my organization, or something else. All right, so it's cooking along. There's some strong feeling that it's not a priority for a lot of folks.
But being part of a community is a priority, or should be a priority. So I'm really interested, not priority, meaning it's not a priority and my institution does not allow it?
Yeah.
Or is it not a priority and I don't want to give back to the community?
Well, I have a feeling we're going to want to follow up on what is the other that people are putting here. So we definitely probably going to want to ask people that. But in the meanwhile, I don't know how to run a study, right? I'm not on the OHDSI forum. So only a couple people are saying it's too time consuming or I don't have the right hardware. It's either, it's not our business, it's not our priority, or actually we don't know how to run it, which suggests we're still not doing the education and other work that we need to be doing to help people be able to take part.
Participate in terms of running studies, and we could certainly consider putting a short tutorial together on involving yourself in network studies.
Right, exactly. In fact, that's the tutorial that we haven't done. It's a great thought. Just real quickly, because we have so many exciting things to cover, but I suspected a lot of people would have other reasons. And so what other reasons do people have for those that put other, for not, for not being able to participate in network studies? So beyond the interest or prioritization, beyond not being familiar with how they're run. So questions around language, around a governance board. So they've got, so the IRB, I think Patrick kind of alluded to this, which is to say that we've all, all of the data you've seen here has been produced by organizations that have, the individuals got clearance from their IRB. But what we didn't share as much is that we actually have a sample IRB that, or IRB submission that has been used by a number of OHDSI collaborators to be able to get clearance within their organizations. But it sounds like that's something we need to work more towards. Data and contractual limitations. Data sharing policy. So a lot of people have data, they have a CDM, but they're not really allowed to just, make stuff for external purposes.
There's a success.
Um,
Didn't know it existed until today. They exist.
Okay, so yeah, there's some of that. So speed takes a long time to run. All right, well, we're going to keep rolling along because a lot of key things we want to do in the short time that we have. But it's very helpful to have this perspective from IRBs to priorities. Andrew, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I just wonder if incentives in a network are a barrier because they're different for people who are in an academic setting where traditional mechanisms for rewarding work are more individual-based and where responsibility and reward are more concentrated on individuals and less on groups, if that's part of the issue. And yeah. guess that's
Yeah.
my speculation that that's at least part of it.
I also wonder too, on a slightly different line, is that there's a lot of people here, but I don't think many of these people have been on our weekly calls or maybe don't know about them, and that's where we hear a lot about our network studies and what different organizations are doing. So maybe we should be pushing that aspect of it, like please join us, like, and making sure everyone knows about our phone calls and the different ones that are available around the world, not just the one that for the East Coast time.
So I think that's a great point, and reflects some of the things people have mentioned around being education, other ways to engage. We'll come back to that question. I did want to broaden things a little bit and ask about people, how we expand our community. So we obviously want to increase engagement. I think we're learning that there's still opportunities that we need to engage better. We need to lower barriers. But also, who are we missing, and how do we bring those individuals in? Government buy-in, more patient organizations, CIO type individuals. Additional funding can help environmental scientists, more pharma from some data vendors, clinicians, et cetera. People also suggest training. So other thoughts on so courses, college courses, getting in more smaller hospitals, community organizations. I don't know if people have other thoughts about.
Well, coming back to your point about education, it would be really nice if in the curriculum of the medical students we give attention to these type of data models and get people on board early in their career. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there to do that. So focus a little bit more on data science with the medical students and then explain these nice initiatives as OHDSI.
It's a very good point. If you look at the biostatistics that most medical students get to pass the United States licensing exam, it's focused almost completely on randomized controlled trials. Right. You can certainly get a high score on that first step without even knowing what a case control study is, right. Or one of the more sophisticated, effective observational designs.
So one of the things I saw up there is a Slack channel, and we have a Slack channel. So for whoever was looking for a Slack channel, join the Slack channel.
I noticed here EMR vendors and also probably knowledge vendors. So there's, I think, a number of organizations that rely on evidence. They gather evidence, collect, and they sell evidence. So I think many of them are relatively few of those organizations are here, and they really rely on evidence as the lifeblood of their business. There's a lot of mentions here around more visibility in publications, et cetera. Mobilize ambassadors to be able to spread more experience and understanding of OHDSI. So this is extremely helpful. We're going to keep moving to a sort of future-facing question, maybe the future-facing question. What should be OHDSI's top goal in 2018? If you want to do the next 18 months, you can. What should be the top goal for the coming year?
I'm betting it's not published papers. Let's see.
All right, so develop a roadmap was the very first one. Didn't take more than just a few seconds for that one to get on there. I think that's well understood. Europe taking over Europe, CDMV6, healthcare reform, or maybe working to inform healthcare reform. Is that kind of the idea that maybe with the type of knowledge and evidence being generated, we can sort of help inform this?
Just wait till 3 a.m.
Okay. All right. So for the most part, well, I guess for those that are kind of zoning, take a second and try to answer this one. Really appreciate it. Take a second. What should OHDSI focus on? Whether you want to say, I want to see genomics in the CDM, whether you say, I want my hospital to start generating evidence for every patient that walks in the door. I want to see. We really need answers to this question to help us understand where we should focus our efforts collectively, so that we can really point ourselves in a way that's going to really help patients and help us grow in the right direction. Publishing a book.
A book.
Very clear goal. Improving methods, moving things to Python away from R. So more countries. So that's a very good point. We have a list of, I think, maybe it was 17 countries or 17 represented. But yeah, there's a lot of places that we know have informatics and talented individuals and data and problems. So more training, rebranding. I think that's a really interesting one. I think I would be curious what people thought about, how they would, sum up or that question of rebranding. How would you?
What is our current brand?
Yeah. How should people think of the OHDSI brand? Is a question that I'd like to ask. How people should. How should people think of our current brand? What message? What brand do we want to convey? I think is a better way to put that. One platform for all problems, increase diversity in collaborators and data sources.
Yes.
Absolutely. Bigger clinical impact. Have the big journals, the big dogs, New England Journal, JAMA, Lancet, something in there that conveys. So promote our agenda to funding agencies. Absolutely. Focus our message. It's a great point. It's a great point. So I support in training, education, certainly more training, more education methods, better messaging. So we're hearing about messaging, theming, branding. I kind of sense that would be an issue for everybody. So what question should OHDSI convey? What brand should we convey? How do we message ourselves? Not OMOP. The DeFalco experts in real-world evidence. So open and research. I think it's interesting that's there. It's certainly not a rebranding, but I think an emphasis of underlying branding and maybe that point of focus. Maybe the story just needs to be sharper on some of those. What do you guys think, even if it's not on the board? Branding.
So this is interesting. It's improving healthcare with data. Whereas our current mission, perhaps it's not well branded, it's improving healthcare with evidence. Is there a difference between evidence and data? Does one speak more loudly to a broader audience?
Yeah, I think the current message is already very nice, but we should really try to change the way we do epidemiology, being more transparent, more reproducible, and that's exactly what we're doing. So I really like the focus that we have and the brand that we use.
And people, some agree, stay focused on analytics. Don't try to be all things to all people. Yeah. Well, I want to take the last, as we've got just a bit of time left to answer this question, explain a little bit how this works. So what question should we have asked you all today? And this is a special type of question in that it's a voting question. So you guys can, if you really have a strong question, put it in. But if you just have bears, maybe wait for a sec, and you can upvote what other people put in. So you put in a question. I mean, certainly if you have a question, put it in, but other people can vote up and say, this is the question that I'd like to answer. So what is a question that you'd like to ask the OHDSI community at this kind of everybody on board? Fair enough. I too am having existential questions at this moment.
Just keep rolling that ball, the boulder up the hill.
Exactly. So, so we're seeing a few things taking the lead. What is the one thing? Let's see. All right, we'll give it a little more time to cook. There's a number of questions up here, and again, doesn't prevent you from adding another question, but take a look at what's up there, and if you feel like your question's represented, go ahead and give that one a vote. Can Patrick sing again? I'm surprised he's only gotten...
It's too early.
Yeah, too soon. Okay.
Yeah.
This is a great one. I'm going to go ahead and say we've hit a good question. What is the one thing OHDSI hasn't done yet but needs to? That question, yeah, that is the question that we need to ask, right? What is the one thing? And we know there's so many things. We've talked about focus. We've talked about rebranding. We've talked about imaging. So what is the one question that OHDSI hasn't done yet but needs to? And I suspected that would be probably the top of people's minds. So I went and put that question in before we got started. And that's the question. What is the one thing that OHDSI hasn't done yet but needs to? Genomics. So the first three are essentially genomics, precision medicine. I don't know if you have any comments on that from the OMOP CDM side of the world, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely interested in getting some genomic information into the CDM. But from a structural standpoint, I think we need help doing that. I think we need some experts. I know that y'all are out there, but we just need you to come forward and say, hey, I think this is the best way to do it, and get your expertise out there so we can start to talk about it and think about how we would really integrate it into the CDM in a succinct way, like we've done with the rest of our tables. It's just a really difficult one because there's just so much information available around genomics.
And a couple other items, thank you, Claire. People mentioned connecting to EHRs and PHRs, more linking to research funding, validation of outcomes, thinking about device data, that Fitbit that was lost. How do we make that device data really work for us? GIS, more automation, visibility, et cetera. But omics is super strong here. We've got at maybe 50% have talked about omics, which maybe suggests that we haven't really organized. In fact, someone asked me at the break what working groups, it was someone working on it. I thought there was a genomics working group, but it wasn't on the wiki. So I think clearly there's a tremendous interest that's been in place for a long time, and as new people come in that area. So providing that book, again, the roadmap, et cetera. So I think this is extremely informative. I want to thank all of the reaction panelists for their on their feet thinking during this session, and thank all of you, and hope that you guys got something out of this time and enjoyed our reaction panel. So thank you.